L'ho visto. Ok.
Thank you very much for being here. We are here at the third panel of the first day of the 2023 Italian Symposium, and we're really glad it's going this way. We see many people, so thank you very much. Thank you to the speakers and the Professor Bertero for being here. Thank you to Professor Elsa Fornero and Miss Alessandra Perazzelli. Let me present to you the guests. I don't think they need any presentation, but just as a formality. Professor Fornero is an Italian economist, university lecturer, who served as Minister of Labor, Social Policies and Gender Equality in the Monti Cabinet from November 2011 to April 2013. She was Vice President of the Supervisory Board of Intesa Sanpaolo, Vice President of the Compagnia di San Paolo, Compagnia di San Paolo, apologies, member of the Board of Directors of the Italian Society of Economists, and member of the Scientific Committee of the General Confederation of Italian Industry. And I could go on and on. It's such a long curriculum vitae.
It's because of my seniority.
Ms. Perazzelli is a member of the Directorate and Deputy Governor of Banca d'Italia since May 2019. In this role, she is also a member of the Integrated Directorate of the Institute for the Supervision of Insurance. She is a member of the Supervisory Board of the Single Supervisory Mechanism of the European Central Bank. Since 2021, she has been a member of the Board of Directors of the Bambino Gesù Pediatric Hospital and the FinTech and InsurTech Observatory Advisory Board of the Polytechnic University of Milan. Moderating the event, there will be Professor Bertero from the Finance Department at the London School of Economics. And as usual, for each panel, we will have a student co-host who is Gaia Durante Mangoni, and she studies international relations at King's College, London. So without further ado, I leave the rest of the discussion to Professor Bertero, and thank you very much, everyone, for being here.
So, thank you very much. So my name is Elisabetta Bertero, as has been said. I'm in the Department of Finance at the LSE. And on behalf of the LSE, I'd like to welcome you all to this symposium, all present in the room, and also people who are following this online. So in terms of the procedures tonight, the way we organize this is that we'll start with short introductory questions to the two panelists by myself. And then Gaia will also join with a number of very interesting questions to continue the conversation. It's really a conversation tonight. And then we'll open up to you, to the audience, for your own questions, and we'll make sure there is enough time for that. So maybe about 40 minutes or so. I just want to say that I would like you to keep your questions short and to the point, so that as many students, as many people in the audience as possible can ask what they would like to find out from our distinguished speakers. So let me start, and we will finish by 8 p.m. So the first thing I wanted to start with was something related to the intergenerational conflict in the labor market in Italy. So Italy has a particular problem with that compared to other countries. And so I'd like to ask Professor Fornero to give us a bit of an idea, drawing on your extensive experience in all this. Give us an idea of what are the issues in this area, and why is it so more problematic for Italy than for other countries. So just to give us the context for this particular problem.
Okay, let's try. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for all the work you have done to organize this. I think the presence here is testimony of the fact that you worked well and that people are eager, the young are eager to discuss many problems, and not just economic problems, but also social problems that we have. And let me say that Italy has a lot of problems, really a lot. So intergenerational conflict, perhaps the word conflict is too much. We have a conflict and we don't like the conflicts. In any case, what I would say in Italy to observe in a neutral way is that we have a generational imbalances, very heavy generational imbalances. That is because of many things. I will start with a very, let's say, simple demographic picture of the country. If Europe has a demographic winter, autumn, Italy is fully in the demographic winter. That is, the population is shrinking at a pace which is not very slow, and there are projections of a further reduction. So we are starting a shrinking population since 5-6 years, and there always been a minus in the variation. In any case, people in the, let's say, most credible scenario says that we will lose something like 7 million people within 2050, which is quite a lot. And the other scenario says that we will be 40 million people in 2100. Now we are 60 million. So the decrease is very sharp. What does this mean? It means that, first of all, you have an impression that the population is changing, because everywhere you go, you see that the number of elder people outweigh the number of the young. You don't see, where I live in Turin, you see many more dogs around and very few children. That is sad, but that is part of our reality. Then we have, I would just mention two factors. One is this change in the population has heavy political consequences, because the young are in a small number with respect to the older, and the politicians look at the older population with much more interest than the young. The median age of the voters is increasing, and that means that policies are looking towards the older segment of the population much more than the young. This is the first implication of an aging population. The second is that, well, we will lack working population. What is called the old age dependency ratio, that is the ratio of people 65 and older, with respect to the population in working age, 64, is about to double in, well, within 2007. Now it is 33, it will go to 70 and even more. That means that it will be very, very difficult for the younger active population to cope with an increasing number of older people if productivity does not go up. Because this is, you know that growth comes from the increase in the working population and increase in productivity. We have a decreasing population and a very stable productivity. Our productivity in the last 20 years has not increased. You can just see like this. but with other countries have a dynamic economic system while we are stable. It's a decline. So we have a demographic winter, and we have from an economic point of view, a decline, an economic decline. And this means that this is for Alessandra, innovation, education, research are not very popular in Italy, in the sense are not factors that are supported very much because of what I said before. The labor market is mirroring this situation. The labor market, well, there have been many reforms of the labor market. What was the key work for these reforms? It was flexicurity, having a more flexible market, less segmented, with a large segment of adult male, and the rest dispersed among marginalized or excluded people. That is the young, that is women, that is the older working population, for whom it was very difficult to find a place, okay? That was the past. All these reforms have tried to modify. There have been reforms trying to get a more flexible labor market, having security also for those, for the employed. But this has not really worked. So instead of having flexibility plus security, we have more precariousness in the labor market and possibly less security, because some changes have been done. I have signed one myself, which is a change in the famous Article 18 of the Statute of Workers. And that was something that people interpreted as a restrictions of protection. And it was, but the idea was going toward inclusions. There is a pay gap. The young earn much less than the medium-aged population, working population. And there is this very sad picture of hundreds of thousands of young people moving abroad, not just for studying. That is good, but to look for an opportunity that they don't find at home. So it's a picture which is quite dismal. It's a picture that I do not want to give you a totally destructive view. No, it's not. It's a country that needs a lot of commitment towards structural problems that have been left behind and that have determined the stagnation of our economy, a very stable society, conservative society. And if you ask, now things have been changed. These days, we have a young woman who is prime minister, another young woman who is head of the general secretary of the Democratic Party. So something is changing. We hope for the better, but still the country expresses a lot of populism in its political instances, a lot of guarantees and subsidies for the state. And this has to be somehow changed by reforms. And it is a very, very difficult task. But I will speak about reforms later.
Yeah. So continuing on this theme, despite the dismal picture that you just painted, but let's cheer ourselves up. Remember, the Economist voted Italy as the most improved country only into 2021. So let's keep that in mind, maybe just to counterbalance this very, dismal picture. I mean, both things are true. So I just wanted to ask a bit more about the labor reforms. So you started with your into 2012, and then there was 2011, and then there was an evolution of further reforms. And so my question is, one, why is it so difficult to change all this, despite these attempts that have been going on now for many years? So why is it so difficult? And if you had a magic wand, what would be the measures that you would introduce now to improve the situation?
Okay, if I had the magic stick, I would just raise the average level of education of our population. This, I think, it's the most important, but education is something that you gain slowly during all your life, not just a magic touch, and you get all the education, what you need to know. But that is talking about magic, and what we need to do is hard work. So my first, why did I become a minister? You would ask. Why was she taken from university? Well, because Italy, there's been many different reconstructions, but in summer 2011, Italy was on the verge of a financial crisis. And it's not just a metropolitan story that has been told. I was absolutely far away from becoming a minister. The day before I was asked, I was in Brussels discussing a research project with many colleagues in different European universities, a project that we won. But of course I was not any longer involved. And people would not believe that I did not know about the possibility to enter. But it was at past night in the evening after my coming back from Brussels that I received a telephone call from Mario Monti saying, he asked, do you know why I'm calling? What would have you said? I said, well, because you want me to wish you all the best. And he said, no, I would like much more. I'm asking you to become my Minister of Labor, Social Security, and Equal Opportunities. Social Security meant having a pension reform. Labor meant having a labor market reform. Why these two were particularly important? Because in this financial crisis of our sovereign debt, the problem as well was in August, 5th of August 2011, the European Central Bank had sent a letter to the Italian government. The Prime Minister was Mr. Berlusconi. And they sent a letter saying, okay, we will buy your bond, helping you. Buying bond by the central bank means a great help to a government, but you have to do reforms to approve the reforms. And there was a list, and both the labor and the pension reforms were listed among the first in the letter. Okay, so it was this, the situation was this. And I can tell you because, well, I would like to tell you, because you are studying, that there is an enormous distance between knowing a problem that you have studied for many years, discussed with colleagues, you wrote about, okay, and having to take decisions that will affect people's life. This is a completely different thing. Political responsibility is not an academic subject. It's very different because you can write your paper, you hope to have a good publication, but then it's a piece of paper, a computer, yourself, a lot of book, colleagues. Here, you decide on people's life, and the pension reform a labor market reforms are reforms across the population, not for a single category, not like having to decide on our beaches. No, it's something which is very general. So I had 20 days to prepare the pension reform. I did. I'm not discussing that now. Maybe there will be questions, but I did the reform. And after that, Mario Monti asked me to prepare the labor market reform. I did the reform, but of course, we are a democratic country, and that means that the reform went to Parliament, and the Parliament approved with a very large majority the reform. Then there was the labor market reform. And just to tell you, we went to the President of the Republic, and he said the labor market reform has to go to Parliament as a design law. There is a huge difference between a decree, which is immediately effective once the Parliament has approved and the President has signed, and a design law. A design law, it means that you prepare a draft law, then it goes to one chamber, and they all want to say something. Of course, it is their duty, and then you go to the other. So it took us almost 5 months to prepare the labor market reform. And I just can tell you this because maybe you have studied how the labor market works, and you know that the labor market, which probably does not have all the complications, technical complications of financial markets, but the labor market is just different because it has to do with us, with people, with their expectations, with what they think about their future. So the labor market, and we tried to have a balance between the different interests of workers and firms, employers. And we thought we had strike a good balance in the trade-off. But here is my idea of a reform, and it is also applied to a pension reform. Reforms in economics, economic reforms are not just technical instruments. They live when they leave Parliament, when they have been approved, but they live in society. So a reform is something that society has to take in, to accept, to understand the logic, the basic pillars of a reform. If this does not happen, and of course, communication, discussions, political parties, mind you, we were what has been called a technocratic government. So I was never a member of a political party. This means that it's very difficult to reach the population because you are a technocrat. And if the political parties do not want to convey the message, which they have approved in Parliament, that is terribly difficult. So the reforms are social processes, and people have to be convinced. And this, by the way, is why I say, and I will talk about this maybe later, I say that talking of economic reforms like the pension and the labor market, there is a necessity of basic economic financial education. Otherwise, if people don't understand, they are easily detracted and they can reject, they find a political force that say, oh, you're right, they look what they have done, and so on and so on. So reforms are very complex, social, in a democracy, of course, very complex social processes that involve people's mind, their expectations, their belief, their attitudes, their behavior. And that's why it's terribly difficult to move from a theoretical, let's say, basis for a reform in the labor market. It's OECD was always telling us, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do the other in a technical way, but reforms are something different.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. Very interesting. So Gaia, do you want to?
Yes,
do you have a
absolutely.
question?
Thank you so much for this very interesting introduction. And I just want to put this into context. I'm an international relations student, so I would like to take more of a global lens to this, to address this issue. And I guess as many of us here in this room can also witness, here in the UK, we have had in the past 2 years, a lot of strikes, and the academic sector has been in conflict with the presidents and the representatives of universities, because there are many calls for reconsidering the pension reform that has also taken place here. There are several studies that say that an average academic has lost £200,000 over the life of their pension, and there have been a lot of pension cuts as a result of the pandemic and other inflation, of course, the war, etc. So it's not just an Italian problem, and I would say that here as well, professors and students are struggling a lot. And even I feel like I've asked around to young students, GTAs and seminar leaders, and they're all around 30, 35 years old, and they're all very, very worried about their pension already at this age. But at the same time, I think we should not talk about France, which is a bit the elephant in the room here, because it's been in the headlines in the past weeks, all the protests that have taken place in France around the public pension reform. And also Macron seems to have a hard time at trying to make his reform through parliament at the Assemblée Nationale. No one is, it's being rejected several times. So basically, for those who don't know, but I guess we're all familiar with it, he wants to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64 years old. And of course, there have been many protests for this because, yeah, I mean, the ideal, the rationale behind this, is the same as that was what was applied in Italy, in the sense that if we live longer, we should also be able to work for longer, because the life expectation has increased. So the retirement age also should be increased. So what I wanted to ask you is, what can the French, would it be possible for the French to finalize this reform soon? And what can the French learn from the Italians for once? Because we have already done our public pension system reform years ago with you. So is there something that the French is there a reason why the French can look at us as a model? And if you can think of other best practices in Europe, or even looking at other international partners for Italy who have an ideal pension system that could be applied to our country or other European countries that are also struggling with this issue.
Do I have an hour to answer?
No, you don't.
Okay, I was sure. Okay, one thing, well, the British pension system is very different from the rest. Here, the funded component, that is the accumulation of funds, investment in financial markets, is quite important. In continental Europe, the main part of the pension is what we call a pay-as-you-go. And this is really at the core of the intergenerational relationship, because the pay-as-you-go means that imagine that you are the Italian population, imagine that you are the working population, imagine that they are the old population already retired or about to retire, and imagine that they are the children. Oh, I didn't know, but this is a good population with a population like this, because you have a lot of children there, you have a large working population, and you have a relatively little retired population. Okay, it means that you work, you pay your contributions, okay? You pay contributions. That is kind of forced savings, right? I am the National Pension Agency. In Italy, it's called the INPS. I take your money and I don't invest this money in financial markets, not at all. Why? Because I need your money to pay for their pensions. This is the system that means no financial reserves. You pay, they receive. You pay, they receive. There is no reserves, okay? So no accumulation, no financial accumulation. And you can also understand that if the population is like you are representing here, the system is okay. Now reverse your image and imagine that those are the newborn and young, still in the education phase of their life, that they are the workers and you are the older population. So they have to pay for you because of the aging, you have grown in number, okay? It's the demographic change we have spoken before, and they have to pay. And imagine when they will be in your place and they will be retired. So they think, like you said, oh, my pension will never be paid. This is what the young typically think of their future pension. My answer to this is it depends on your working life. So don't believe to a politician who is ready to promise you a good pension if he's not ready to do anything for you to have a good job. If you see that he's really working to improve the job market, then you may believe that he is credible on his pension promise. Otherwise, don't believe. Why? Because work and earnings, labor income are the best premises for your pension. And this is if you work and if you have a good working career, good pay, then you will have a good pension. Otherwise, even a good promises, if the demography is wrong, it's impossible. It's not, we talk of sustainability a lot. A pension system which is threatened by a wrong demography is not credible. Mind you, I'm not talking now because it will be too long. There is something we could say about migration because we are shrinking. The other side of the Mediterranean Sea, they are fast growing and they ask to come. And we say, no, please stay there. So there is a huge discourse that could be done on migration. I'm not saying that even if you consider migration, you need pension reform. But it is a factor that can somehow, and that's why France has a different problems with respect to what we had in 2011. France has no financial crisis, and France has a different demographic scenario. It is going, the French population is going down, but very slowly. Why? Because they had a lot of immigration in the past, and the fertility rate of migrant people are still different from the fertility rate of native French people. And I am invited quite often to talk about the French reform. I'm quite surprised because it's not a big reform. It's increasing 2 years. Many people say, okay, 2 years is quite long. But, well, there is a transition of 7 years. And if they do distinguish between different kind of jobs, that can be acceptable. But there is here what I said about the reform. Talk about a French citizen and mention the pension reform, it will say, I'm ready to go on street to manifest whatever the reform is, even if it's not a tragedy. Our reform was very hard. But the French one is what we call a parametric reform. They change the parameters of the system and make the system more uniform, because they do have a lot of regimes, while we now have one regime and one basic formula, which make the system sustainable, financially sustainable. If it is socially sustainable, depends on how the economy grows, how productivity grows. It is what I said before. Can you imagine of having people with a poor working life and having then a nice pension? If you are poor during your working life, it's very difficult that you will have a rich pension. So the main change, the basic pension reform, is to have a labor market that works effectively, having a high employment rate and having good pay, and that means higher productivity. We have the lowest employment rate in Europe. Italy, with Greece, has the lowest employment rate. I'm not talking about geographical differences like the 30% employment rate of women in southern Italy, 30%, which is really the lowest. And of course, we then have moonlight jobs and all this, but this is not something we need to be proud of. So that is a very, very big question. But at the core of it, there is the question that the pension system is really perhaps the main intergenerational institution that we have in our democratic system. And if you design well the system, it is sustainable through generations, which is what we need.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So I would like to turn now to posing a question to you. So changing a bit the area in a way. So there's been a lot of revolutionary technological innovation in finance through changes that have come through big tech companies, fintech companies, and so on. So my question is, how have central banks, and in particular the Bank of Italy, reacted to these big changes? That's one part of the question. Secondly, I wonder if you can give us a bit your opinion on one potential future big change in this respect, which is the introduction of central bank digital currencies. What do you think about it? And also, what do you think would be the roles and functions that CBDCs would bring to households, businesses, and so on, which are not available at the moment?
Yes. Well, thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. I think you have a great idea. I think you need to have more networking with your home country. I think you need to have us here to you. And so when I received the invitation, I was extremely happy to come to London and meet you. But first of all, I mean, our country is full of a lot of contradictions. And you know, one thing that I was just thinking, Elsa, while you were talking, is that, you know, last year and 2 years ago, we had the better growth of SMEs in our country that has been going much better than Germany and Spain, and a little lower, you know, the thresholds put by the French SMEs, but the Italian SMEs are champion in innovation, for instance. They're champion in bringing technology to change your business models. They're bringing new people. They're differentiating in the kind of skills that they are hiring. And so, I think that there are some very positive signs in our country. It's all kind of sort of, it's hard sometimes because you think of the North as being the one part of the country where you have more of this. But, recently I've been working together with a couple of universities in Sicily and in Apulia and, and in Campania. And I have to tell you that they have nothing to be feeling less or not as prepared as some of the, most important universities that are in the North. So let's be positive about this. It's a difficult country, but it's also an amazing country, extremely creative, extremely full of very competent people. And, so I really hope all of you're going to come back and do very well in our country. So we'll wait for you there. So let me give you a little bit of a snapshot of what I do, because otherwise you don't understand why they've been asking me to talk to you about technology applied to the financial world. First of all, I'm a member of the board of the Italian Central Bank, and we have a governor, we have a director general that looks after the organization, and then there are three of us, and I look after banks. I'm at the head of the department that works on supervision. And so because of that, I'm a member of the ECB supervisory, mechanism. Mm-hmm. And so I look at Italian banks, but I also look at European banks. And in that capacity, I also, I bring to the board those requests for licenses, for new banks or new financial institutions, or as I would tell you in a while, newcomers, completely new animals that are coming to the financial world that are brought by technology. So they're extremely interesting for us to understand whether they can be licensed, whether they can come in, what are they going to do in our market, whether we need to stretch the law, whether we need new laws, or how we go about that. The challenges that a central bank faces right now because of technology are extreme. First of all, you have seen how, we are depending on the technology that is coming out of, for instance, the European system. I mean, there are like a lot of big tech companies that have developed state-of-the-art technologies on a number of financial, sort of segments that are becoming more and more important. They take their expertise from what we have seen being, the use of social media. All right. So we have seen companies like Amazon, starting with books and then coming into all the retail, and now giving people who are actually acquiring on their platforms also the possibility of being financed. They have a banking license in the United States and also in other countries. So they're able to give you that finance that you need in order to buy their product, the product that they are, sold on their platforms. We see that Apple has become like a payment system, provider. We see that, Google is also entered into this side. So that is extremely challenging for the financial world. I mean, think about, you guys, they were probably all on Revolut and Monzo and all of that kind of stuff. When I went to buy, when I opened my bank account, I had to go to, to the branch and I was 18, but I brought my mom with me because, you never know. And I had to sign like lots and lots of papers because basically the kind of relationship that you had with a bank was one based on paper, based on inquiring on your position, and then you move on. So there was a whole issue of identifying you. And sometimes your identification, it wasn't enough. They needed to see your parents, even though maybe you were a young worker, like I was myself while I was studying. So, all of that And the fact that these platforms have brought to the financial world such a challenge is for us a nightmare, all right? Because first of all, we have a set of rules, which is very much analogic, you know, it's not digital. I mean, it's a set of rules that are, you know, have been developed over years, over a lot of effort in trying to understand how the markets, you know, worked, what kind of consumer protection you needed, how transparency had to be applied to a number of transactions. And all of those laws today, they do not cover, you know, the blanket is way too short and you can't, you know, really do much with it. So the first thing that we need to do right now is understand how do we change the laws in order to allow these investors to come in, these companies to come in, to, you know, what kind of requirements we need to implement for them to become part of our financial system, and what are the safeguards that we want to put in order to protect financial stability, protect consumers, and protect the savings, all right? These three things, consumers, savings, and financial stability, are at the core of the role of a central bank, all right? So that is what we do, no matter how we do it. But these are the three things that are at the core of our activity. And so you can imagine that at this point of time, for instance, with the advent of everything which is crypto, you know, how do we promote innovation so we don't stifle, you know, these new companies and these new products? How do we protect financial stability? Why we do not stifle innovation? Why we promote competition, but we also make sure that we do not have a complete, you know, sort of destroy the system of commercial bank, retail banks as we know it. All right. So this is the kind of challenge that we face every day. And it's extremely difficult because you need, first of all, you need to know a lot more, you know, a lot more than our, you know, economics or legal backgrounds. You need to be learning about technology, because the technological solutions that are brought to us sometimes are completely new, and sometimes we do not know how to regulate them. So one of the things that we've been doing in the last year and a half at the Banca d'Italia is that we we did something completely new that was a little sort of like disconcerting at the beginning when we promoted it, but it's becoming extremely helpful in the relationship with these new operators in order to understand exactly when they come to us what they need to have in place in terms of rules and regulation in order to make sure that they come into our markets in a safe way, in a sustainable way, in a way that promotes not only the protection of those three elements that I told you, but also their own ability to grow, okay? Because that is also important. So what we did, let me a step back. Why do I talk to you about their ability to grow, okay? To grow and to establish themselves? Because most of the times, and this is something that I learned very much. At some point, a few years ago, I decided that I need to go back to university. So you know, my kids had gone to study, and I thought, you know, I had to do it too. So I went to Stanford, and I did, you know, a few months learning the relationship between technology and the financial world. And one of the things that really got to me there while I was there, there was like all these startups, all these investors, everybody was so cool, you know, everything was so cool, etc. These kids who were starting these startups, they didn't have the language that allowed them to relate to the regulator, all right? They were fantastic. I mean, they were wonderful ideas, but they didn't even know how to talk about those three elements, okay? Stability, savings, and consumer protection. you come in as a payment system. You want to come in and become Monzo or become, N26 or Revolut. These three operators, before they became what you are using today, they had to go through such a trial, all right? They had to learn how to talk to the regulator, but we had to learn how to talk to them, all right? So what did we do? This the thing that I was telling you before. We opened up an innovation center in Milan. Okay, we didn't do it in Rome because we wanted to kind of show that we were everywhere. We were only in the capital, but we were also in Milan. Milan is the financial center of Italy, so we went there. Okay, and in this center, we do call for proposals. So we invite operators to come in and propose new solutions to us, okay? Last year, we did it on the application of artificial intelligence to the financial sector. This year, we're doing on DLT, okay, blockchain and everything. We didn't know what kind of response we were getting from the market. And it has been absolutely astonishing how many people came to us and the kind of ideas that came to us. And the majority of Italian. This year, we also have some South East Asian companies and some other European companies. But the one thing that is so interesting is that the kind of project they're coming to us, they want to know whether they are innovative enough to be going onto the market and have some possibility of growing. They want to know whether they are within the sort of the tracks of regulation, the applicable laws that are right now the laws of Italy, but the Euro system, in fact, because, as you know, our laws are, of course, Europeans. And also they want to know whether, going onto the market, going on to become, when they become subject to commercial contract, and so they go into prototyping, they are interesting for investors, all right? And this exercise for us has been extremely interesting because we had to learn how to talk to them. And so we've been hiring people that are not traditionally in a central bank. So there are engineers, data analysts, there are a bunch of mathematicians and physics and all of that. And the combination of all these people together with, our normal colleagues has been really wonderful. And so we are learning from them what kind of regulation we need to implement, because as a central bank, what we do when the laws, are coming in, we do secondary regulation, okay? We do those laws that then the rules that are then applicable to the market. And so what I like to say here is that I am extremely positive about what I see in the market right now. There's a lot of push, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of people. A few days ago, we had a young man Italian, who came here to found his own company a lot of years ago, and now has come back and is got a license from us, and is doing what he's doing in Italy and is becoming a unicorn. I don't know whether you know what a unicorn, you know what a unicorn is. So, I'm extremely happy to say that, we are contributing to create a sort of a possibility for a new growth of young companies, sustainable and capable of becoming, of growing. The other important thing, and then I get to CBDCs, is that the level of and that the level of investment on financial technology, let's call it that way, in Italy is growing. Okay, so there's a lot of interest, and also interest coming from abroad. There's a growth in the venture capital market in Italy right now, which is very interesting, and it's going in this direction. And there are a lot of young people that are working in the sector. very quickly on CBDCs.
Just 2 words.
2 words. I mean, it's you know, it's a cryptocurrency is run by the central bank. So there cannot be something nicer than that. I mean, I'm just provoking a little bit here. Okay, I'm provoking. But what I want to say is that, listen, I think there are a number of reasons why we should have CBDCs in particularly in Europe. I mean, this is something also geopolitically extremely interesting and relevant. And also it's going to be something stable, controlled by the ECB, and it's going to be cheap and it's going to be available to everyone. So that, I think, it's extremely important to say. It's something that is for everybody, and the costs are going to be extremely limited. Okay.
The public good.
Public good
money.
Public good money.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then
thank you
I think what I
Yeah.
would like is, because it's look at the time. So if you could ask
Yeah.
a question and a brief answer, maybe.
Brief
and then
answer.
Of course.
Go to the Q&A.
To the Q&A.
Yeah. So I feel like the ideas, the interest in Italy is there, but we lack really the concrete skills. And I did some research, and I found that a study conducted in 2020 by the OECD
Mhm.
placed Italy at the bottom of the list of European countries in terms of financial literacy. So there is a lot of, there isn't enough financial knowledge among the Italian population. And I think it's really outrageous that now in 2023, we still don't have finance courses in high schools, or I'm not saying in primary school, but at least in high school.
Primary school.
Yes,
Where you
exactly.
need-
Especially, especially if after students have to study that topic for 3 years, they cannot arrive at university without having any prior knowledge. And as I'm also a bit of a aspiring feminist, I also had a look at the gender differences, and that's even more acute and even more worrying. So, and I found that Italian women, in terms of financial literacy, are on the same level of Colombian women. And I found that very surprising. And I feel like it's still a taboo today in Italy for women to talk about money, maybe because it's due to historical reasons, because women were normally not the ones who were going to work, but they were just staying at home. So they have not been used to manage the money as much as men did. I wanted to ask you if there's a way to change this trend, if you see some improvements on this side, because I mean, a citizen is also a homo economicus, so he should have all the financial opportunities he needs to address such a financially complex world. So do we have to start from schools or from households first? Where is it more urgent? And if you also want to add something as you dealt with the gender.
Briefly.
Yes,
Okay.
briefly.
Should I? Well,
Time to
I let me tell you this.
Positive
I mean,
insight.
the whole issue of financial education is it's a great problem in Italy, and it's a problem for everyone. With the rise of poverty in Italy, in this couple of years that we had the pandemic and everything, we also saw that our women, the ones who are less capable of even like managing that little, income that they have. And this is like a terrible thing, because it, especially for a family where there's a woman as a single parent. So families where there is only one parent and the parent is a woman, because that translates into poverty of her children. And poverty is not only poverty because you can't eat. Poverty is like the inability of being cured, right? The inability of having access to, good schools, the ability to have access to all sorts of services, because there are a lot of implication about this. Now, I think that we should start with kids very soon, and I think we should start with family. I think that there is an issue here which is, very much related to patriarchy. and to the fact that women have been, not seen as providers, and women have not been given the ability to deal with money, even with the, we're all Italian. Think about the paghetta, okay? Well, the pocket money that you get as a child, how many times, at my age, when I was a kid, I remember I had to fight with my cousins. I had male cousins. They were getting a paghetta that was twice mine. So I had to sort of like, negotiate with my mom and dad, and then there is the whole issue of negotiating skills, for women that are around money, the sort of like, extreme difficulty with which women ask for a raise, and I in my life before coming to be a central banker, I worked in companies and banks, and I always had people coming to me. The men were all asking for a rise every time I gave them something, more to do or a different level. The women were saying, thank you for trusting me, okay? And I was going mad, say, no, you have to say, how much money are you giving to me? What kind of a rise, I'm getting here? So, but all of this, right now, there are, in Banca d'Italia, what we've been doing is to work on financial inclusion now for many, many years. We started with schools, so we have people going into schools, and we go to, scuole medie, so, kids that are like above 10 and before the adolescence, that kind of thing. But recently, what we have done together with RAI, so the Italian broadcast television, is we started to put pills of financial education into everything. So you even have them into soap operas and fictions and stuff like that, which works. It works a lot because it's the kind of messages that you get, and people starting to talk about these things, and also big containers like Uno Mattina, Mara Veniera, on a Sunday afternoon. I mean, yes, it's kind of funny, but it's actually very, very important, because having women that talk about money and and relate to each other, talking about investments, talking about savings, talking about all of these things, makes it normal in the culture, in the popular culture of people, just to be able to discuss these issues. Consider this, and then I close. If you look at retail banks, women who are head of, branches are normally the ones who have the more long-standing customers, and their customers are women because they manage the family money, and they go to them, and they got the kid who's getting married, the other kid who's getting graduated, the other one who needs some loan because it's buying a house or going, somewhere. So the point is that it's hard to get this kind of, knowledge surface and become the norm. Okay, so this is something where Banca d'Italia, we're very much involved in this. There is a whole department which is called Department Tutela Educazione Finanziaria. There's a wonderful lady who's the head of this department, Magda Bianco, my colleague. And she is, I mean, she's a trooper. I mean, she's, doesn't take no as an answer. She never stops. And so we're doing this, in universities, we're doing this in schools, and now in TV. Is that enough? I don't think it's enough. I think that has to be part of the curricula of the Italian kids, starting very, very early, starting to learn it. I think knowing how to deal with your own money and, and planning on, if for your life, taking into consideration finance, it's really about exercising your rights as a citizen. I mean, it's a lot more than just a nice to have. Is a must, in order to be capable of being fully integrated into society.
Thank you for that, for what you're doing.
Sorry?
Thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, no, that's all right. That's what I'm paid for. Thank you for asking.
And lots of positive messages as well. So I suggest that now we go and, let's see if what questions there are, and then maybe Elsa at the end, if there's time, because I know you're also very interested and involved in
Very
also
involved in financial
literature,
education,
and
very
also
much involved.
you've done research in this area, so very important. But let's first take a few questions, and then we will go back to that. So I suggest we take three questions at a time, and then then you answer depending what the question is about. So there is a person there. There's a over there.
There with the green
Jumper, and this person here with the checkered jumper afterwards. Okay. Go ahead.
Quick question to Professor Fornero. To what extent is the adoption of a pension system more similar to the UK one desirable in Italy, or at all possible?
Okay. Second question over there.
Hi, my question is also to Professor Fornero. My question is about minimum wage and the capacity of retaining young talent in Italy, especially given that all EU countries, apart from the most wealthy one, like Norway or Switzerland and Italy, don't have a minimum wage. I wanted to ask you, how imperative do you think is minimum wage to retain talent in Italy, or if you have a comment about the correlation between the two?
Thank you. Then question here.
Hello. I wanted to ask you, so you've talked about gender equality and especially also how the importance of the role of women within both labor and finance in Italy. And I wanted to know what how you think that the actual government, the actual Italian government can affect the labor market and also like the financial aspects of Italy in particular, how they relate with gender equality, and if what is going to bring for the future.
Thank you. So do you want to take the first two and then?
So, very quickly, when you have a pay-as-you-go system, it's terribly difficult to exit. Why is this? Because people are paying now. What they pay is used to pay pensions now. So what they will receive does depend on other people who now are very young or still in school, paying contribution. So if you say, well, now let's move towards a mixed system where you have part a pay-go and part a funded system, then somebody must pay less for the current retirees because they also have to put aside something for their own pensions. And who is going to pay for the now retirees? So that's why it's terribly important that when you have a pay-as-you-go, instead of trying to go to funding future pensions, you have a well-constructed building, have a good architecture, a sustainable architecture. That means reform. And reform, as I said before, depends on demographics and depends on economics. If you have the good demography and an economic who is growing, then your problem are much less. But going out of the pension pay-as-you-go system is almost impossible. We once did, we said to give the opportunity for the young, like you, when entering the labor market, just to take 5 percentage points of their payroll tax, which is 33% in Italy, and to put in a pension fund, in a funded pension fund, so as to realize a mixed system. This costed, and we calculated what the reform would be necessary to have this transition, but it was never done. And nowadays, the system is not sustainable per se. So the government has to take money from elsewhere and put in paying pensions. That is why we have a very large public expenditure, but we also have a school that suffer, hospital that suffers, low pay for public employees, because our public expenditure is heavily devoted to pay for pensions. And that is the imbalances I was talking about before. Minimum wage. I am in favor of the minimum wage. I am an economist, and I've taught almost all my life that putting a minimum wage is interference with the market and the market adjustments. But now I think that sometimes the market needs a shock. And when
Some
we
help.
have,
Need some help.
well, let's call, well, she's been my student, by the way.
Yes.
Anyway,
A few years ago,
well,
a couple.
then if I have a minute, I will tell you something. I tell you now, because with a British colleague, I said, well, you know, with my age. And he said, don't say age, say seniority. Another time I was saying, well, with my seniority, and the other person was German this time, I said, don't say seniority, say experience. So I have age, seniority, experience. Okay. In any case, minimum wage, I think it's necessary now. And it has to do with something which was mentioned today in the formal panel, which is not, maybe it's a difficult path, but it has to do with not maintaining in life firms that are not capable of being economically independent. They need always kind of subsidies. And this, okay, there is a huge problem there. The problem of workers, also the problem of the owner of the firms, if it's small. But sometimes this is just the maintaining inefficiency and contributing to inefficiency. And I think now it's time for Italy to start seriously considering the minimum wage. And luckily, we have examples in Europe, and we can learn from the good practices. But it is important because the level of earnings sometimes is really too little. And you know, the poverty in Italy is concentrated among the young families. And ask why fertility rate in Italy is so low. And certainly it has to do with the difficulty of forming a family or wanting children. Because you say, well, it's difficult for myself. How can I do with children? So it's a huge problem, but it's time to start seriously thinking. Talking to the government, I don't think this government is on the right track. No. Well, no, I was happy when I saw that in terms of the budget law, our prime minister was quite prudent. So she did not continue on her anti-Europe discourse that she had before, very much anti-Europe. She understood that we are in Europe, we need Europe, we can contribute to Europe. And so this is important, this was important. But the majority, her majority is, well, I give you two examples. First, I mentioned before our beaches, and you know that the beaches in Italy are, well, since many, many years, are every year given to those who are managing the beaches, paying very, very little to the state and having a good rent. So I have nothing against them, those people, but they work a few months in the year and they live comfortably the whole year. And 20 years ago or something, there was a European directive saying, okay, you have to put these management of the beaches in the marketplace. So let's people participate in a competition and say, well, I can do better than you, or you can do better than me. Let's see how the price is going. 20 years. It has been postponed again because they are a powerful lobby. And this government, which should be pro-market because they are the right, and they should be pro-market. And one of the preferred sentence by our prime minister is, let those who have ideas work and implement those ideas. And okay, so that means competition, but competition, regulated competition, because we are pro-market, but we think the market needs to be regulated. And so I'm not very confident on this. I just want to say, well, particularly on women, my comment with what Alessandra said before, because I am also very much involved personally as University of Turin, and personally because I accept many invitations, but the key in Italy is that the concept of economic independence of women has little social value. So it's not a concept that people consider, yes, it is important. For us, there is always the idea that it's better to have a good husband providing for you, or somebody can. This is still very much pervasive, and that is why I think we need to fight for women's economic independence. And financial literacy is a factor for financial independence. But I just add one thing and then I stop. And the thing is, financial literacy is a right because it's literacy, and literacy is a right. But financial literacy is not important just for personal finance, having the capability to manage, to better manage the people's life cycle. It's also important for society, because if people do not understand, this is what I said before, if people do not understand the basic element of economic reforms, they are going to oppose, because a reform always asks some present sacrifices in exchange for future benefit. And if people do not understand this intertemporal exchange, then they oppose the reform. And it is what Juncker said. We politicians, we all know what has to be done. The problem is how to get re-elected once we have done it. But if the situation is this simple, then the answer is very simple. Explain to them the benefit of reforms. If you understand, they will also understand.
Thank you very much. I think all this will resonate with my FM 101 students. I can see one over there. The importance of financial literacy, I mean. Yes, do you want to add something? Okay, and then who else?
Quickly. There are 1, 2, 3. No, I just want to say something very, very brief, which is, you know, the fact that Italian women do not go to the workforce has been constant over the years and going back and forth, but the numbers are still pretty much the same. Now, I haven't seen, and this is not only this government, but I haven't seen in the previous governments anyone that has really developed a plan for, you know, a strategic plan for with a number of remedies to bring women to the workforce. I mean, this has been true, you know, for many, many years, many governments. With the last government, the one before this one, we had done some work together with them in order to help on a number of issues. And this year, in June, we will come out, Banca d'Italia will come out with a set of studies on women and labor in Italy that are going to hopefully be presented to the government and maybe can be the base for some intervention. So that there is no always hope that happens. So, but I think that bringing women to the workforce is not being a priority for not only this government, you know, Elsa, but for, you know, the tradition of the Italian governments that have it's a precise economic choice of putting onto women, you know, the care for the elderly and the kids. I mean, if you do not invest in a number of services, you are simply saying that those who have to take care, it's an economic choice. I mean, there isn't that much to say. You know, you don't put the money where it's needed. Why do women should, you know, burden themselves with more than one child if they don't have the possibility of studying, working, and determine their lives? So it's an issue of culture, it's an economic choice, but it's an issue of culture as well.
Thank you. So we had a question over here, and then a question, there was another one. Where was the other one here? Oh, here. There was a third. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4. So they have to be very quick questions and very quick answers.
So how to put together the two pictures of Italy presented by Professor Fornero and Deputy Governor Perrazzelli, which are both true. So high unemployment rate, much higher when it comes to women, unfortunately, and demographic winter, low salaries, and very positive examples in innovation and creativity. So how to put together these two and structured problems and heights of Italy in our system to reach sustainable growth. Are the answers women and migration?
Thank you. So there's a question here, I think. Excuse me, here, there. Thank you. And then there's one, yeah, over there. The black jumper, and then one over there, the other black jumper.
Good evening, everyone. You both ended up talking about labor policies, strategic communication for making women more literate about economics and so on. But in practical terms, like what should like the Ministry of Gender Equality in Italy that right now is, I don't know, concerned a lot with demographics and motherhood. What is a real labor policy that they should support or implement? Because the policy for RAI is amazing, but it's a long-term process. What the ministry should do in the short term?
Thank you. Speak in the microphone close.
Okay. Hi. My brief question is still about the gender issue, because like tonight, we stressed a lot the role of migration and gender issues in terms of sustainability. And of course, like migration is a very, very sensitive cultural issue. But like we all agree that gender issues should be at the center of the political agenda. But like the impression to me is that, okay, now a lot of progress has been done, but still the gender issues are at the margin of the policymaking agenda and political agenda in Italy. So why, if we all are aware that they are important, why now politicians are not paying too much attention to that, to fix some issues, like, for example, the pension reforms that we discussed at the beginning?
Thank you.
Hi, my question for Professor Fornero is, what is your thoughts about the stepping in of non-political figures in political roles? and wider, is sort of more wide.
Yeah, can you repeat? We couldn't hear what you said.
What is your thoughts about the stepping in of non-political figures in political roles, such as yourself? In general, how do you perceive the existence of technocratic governments, such as Mr. Draghi's one? How did you sort of like see your appointment? Did you perceive it with a sort of element of delusion? Do you think that was in a way that encapsulated in a way the fail of the political class in Italy?
Thank you.
Well, Italy is full of contradictions. So it's not impossible because we have geographical differences, we have cultural differences, we have language differences. And so this is not surprises. And it is true. And I don't want to leave you with the impression that I have a very negative view of my country. No, I love my country. That's why I think it should be much more involved in trying to adjust to these paths or these shocks or these black swans that are coming to us. We have the capacity, but we always argue about everything, and we spend a lot of energy in discussing just because we are quarreling too much. In any case, it's more difficult, but it's true that things are changing. And here, Alessandra, perhaps she has a different observatory. What I've done in terms of financial education myself is meeting people in villages from north to south, from regions where the right has a large majority and where I was always opposed with the most awful insults. This has happened many times. But if you talk to people, and now I am retired from the university, even if I still work, but if you are retired and you can just speak openly to people, and they understand that you are not saying something because you want to please them or you want their votes. It's an open discussion. People perceive they are not stupid as politicians sometimes think, many times, very often indeed. So that is my answer to you. Family and again, women. I do believe that it is what Alessandra said, it's a cultural factor. But I do believe that family still consider that it is mainly a duty of women in the family to do care work, this kind of activity. And it's still pervasive, not among the younger generation. Here, the question of your work, my work, your salary, my salary is much more on an equal, on a level playing field. But in the past, and it's still transmitted to daughters sometimes, it's different. Once we did a nice paper on financial language, Alessandra, and the stereotypes that are used in financial language are very important, and they create a distance with respect to women because they mainly refer. We had we were two economists and two linguistics doing this paper on Italian and English, although it was done by a Dutch economist. And through a strong methodology by linguistic studies, we found that the presence of these stereotypes. And the stereotypes put a distance between, oh, it's financial. This is not for me because finance, it's something for my partner or whatever. if you use the right language, which does not mean our paper was had the title "Knitting Your Portfolio." Knitting your portfolio was kind of joke, of course. We don't need this kind of language for women, but we need a more neutral language. So it's a question of working around a circle. And for example, if you look at France, she was mentioning France before, France has had a policy for families since a long time, and that has worked. For us, I was the first who introduced parental leave, but I did not have money because of the financial situation. So I introduced 3 days as a kind of signal leave, maternal and paternal leave is to be shared. It was 3 days. Now it's at least the compulsory, it is 1 month, and that was 10 years ago. So all these are changes that require time. Technocratic government, and then I stop. I think governments need to be political. A technocratic government is an exception. When our government was formed, it is because political parties did want somebody else to do the job, because they could have said no to the President of the Republic. They could have said, okay, let's vote. Vote is to see what people think and to see whether there is a majority. But they said, no, it's better to have a government doing the things that the markets, financial markets, are asking, because that was the problem of our public debt, of our sovereign debt. And I remember, as I said before, the question was in the first days, where do we find the money to pay for public salaries, for teachers, doctors in hospital, policemen in the streets, judges? Where do we take the money? Where do we have the money? We need to have them lend it to us. And if people do not trust you in financial markets, they say, okay, stay away from Italy now. Stay away from Italy. That means the famous
Yield
spread between the German bond and the Italian bond, and everybody was talking about the spread. That was a situation of crisis. And so it can be accepted. The problem is that after that, Italy had many other technocratic or mostly technocratic government, because politics, sovereignism, populism, is this for the people? No, it's not. It's very bad for the people. The opposite is what is good for the people. Education, open information, transparency, and discuss seriously.
Thank you, Elsa. Would you like to add a couple of things?
I just want to the young lady who was saying, what can a government do? I mean, there's so many things that a government can do, and you know, equal pay for those who start positions, you know, paternity and maternity leave over a period of time and interchangeable. You know, within companies, there are a number, for instance, what we've done in Italy to intervene with quota laws in order to have women on boards. I mean, there are a number of, you know, intervention that could be done at public level, but also in the private companies. The issue is, do you have the money to do that, and whether that becomes a priority for a government, and whether and who makes the decision? Most of the times is men, and most of the times is men who do not have raised their children and did not have to sacrifice their work, you know, for their families, and this is an issue. And as long as, you know, we continue to divide and ask men to provide and suppress their feelings towards their young families, and ask women to sacrifice everything in order to take care of their families and their elders, we're not going to go anywhere. So that's why it's a cultural issue. And that's why you guys are so important, you know, because you are faced with this kind of questions and you see the kind of mistakes that we have made, you know, and it's also a very important psychological part that, you know, intervenes in keeping things as they are, you know, and keeping this, you know, culture of patriarchy in place. And that has a lot of implications at social, economic, and political level. It's not just a soft issue, it's a hard issue.
Okay, so it just leaves to me to conclude. Apologies for being a little bit late, but I didn't want to interrupt this very experienced and interesting all-female panel who was here to bring their experiences to us. So let me first thank all of you for the audience in presence and online. Second, I like to thank the United, I think it's called, Italian Societies for all the work they've done to organize these very interesting panels and these 3 days symposium. Thirdly, I like to thank Gaia for her questions and participation. And then finally, our two panelists. So I would like you to join in thanking them now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I really